Paul Finebaum covers the SEC like nobody else. He joins us now. Paul, help me with this Tennessee situation. Who does Tennessee think that they can still get?
I'm not sure, Dan. They have blown this about as badly as I've ever seen, and that's saying something when you consider watching coaching searches. You can pull out any cliche you want. They're very difficult to watch in real time, but in this case, Tennessee has made critical mistakes from the beginning. The fans thought they were going to get John Gruden, which you and I both know they were never going to get, and then they waited several days for Dan Mullen. And he slow-walked them and ultimately chose Florida. And Greg Schiano was the backup choice. And I agree with everything you have said. The only thing I fault the athletic director for not being aware that was a potential problem. And from all indications, it caught him off guard, which I think led him to completely overreact. What happened yesterday in real time on social media is about as embarrassing as anything I have seen in relation to at least a college sport. I realize there are many other more egregious things that have happened on social media, but several people began this campaign against Schiano by propagating the Penn State situation. And what was even more distasteful is that several state representatives, without knowing anything, just jumped into the fray and started tweeting at the athletic director, and then students showed up because, hey, there was nothing else to do on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and before you know it, Greg Schiano's reputation was tattered and torn and shattered, and Tennessee backed out.
Yeah, I don't want to hear a politician involved in this. I don't, and I feel bad for Schiano, who I don't know. He wouldn't have been my first candidate, my top choice, but. I don't know how you vet this, though, Paul, that all of a sudden this new athletic director who's hadn't even been on the job for a year is going to go, you know what, just this rumor, innuendo, hearsay, throwaway line, how many years ago at Penn State is going to come back and haunt me by hiring this guy. I got to be fair to Curry. I don't know if he had any, obviously blindsided. I don't know how he could have seen this coming.
No, well, listen, that's fair, but at least be aware that there's a potential issue with Schiano, and be prepared for it, and know what the facts are. And by the way, if he knew yesterday what we know today, he would have probably said, you know what, I'm going to grin and bear it. I'm going to bring this guy in. I'm going to explain it, and have knowledgeable people explain that this was really overdone. But instead, he caved in, and that's probably the saddest part of it. Yeah. And I think what it says is, if you're the next man up, you're going, do I want to work for this guy? And I think that's an issue it just, as someone who, Dan, let me come to the altar and confess my sins. As someone who does a talk show where a lot of this goes on, I don't want to act like I'm a virgin here. This is not news to me that fans can rise up, but I just don't like the way it was done. It was done maliciously. It was done as an angry mob, and I really. By the way, I went to school at Tennessee. Not that matters, but it's something that I care about, like anyone would care about their alma mater. And I really wonder what the future is, because, quite frankly, the last 10 years have been a total embarrassment, and I'm not sure what the next couple of years look like after this.
What about T. Martin?
It's actually a pretty good idea. He quarterbacked Tennessee to its last really good day in college football, winning a national championship. Ironically, T. Martin came in and won the championship the year after Peyton Manning left, which is something that it's a footnote or maybe a Final Jeopardy question. But he's at SC. He has not. There's always been some distance between T and the university, but at this point, he would be a good choice. I'll throw one even more bizarre. It doesn't even seem that strange today. Yesterday, it would have seemed like the upset of the millennium. But Lane Kiffin's not a bad choice either.
Hey, okay, sure, why not?
He's been there before. He left after a year, and he's done a great job since.
Well, it's amazing the sins you can forgive if somebody's talented. And, hey, Lane Kiffin knows offense, and you got to have offense in the SEC. And, sure, we'll look the other way with Lane Kiffin coming in. We're talking to Paul Finebaum of the SEC Network, Paul Finebaum Show. Okay, a couple other things here. Where do you want to start with the other coaching changes here? How surprised were you Chip Kelly said no to Florida and yes to UCLA?
Not very surprised. And, I see Chip, or I've seen Chip every Sunday in Bristol. So I've gotten to know him a little bit, and he consistently and constantly talked about fit, Dan. And knowing the Florida culture and knowing Chip Kelly, I didn't see those two going hand in hand. I think he realized that pretty quickly. Florida is a pressure cooker on a similar level as Alabama, if there can be such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, 3 of the last 4 coaches there have failed. Urban Meyer is the only one who has been successful since Steve Spurrier. And I think Chip knew that. UCLA is a much quieter job. After Florida, Dan Mullen was at best third choice for Florida behind Chip and Scott Frost, but he knows the terrain, and he was there during the last glory days, and that's when Tebow and Urban were there.
Yeah, I think UCLA makes more sense for his personality. Plus, you only have to beat a couple of teams in the Pac-12 to get a chance to play for the national championship. And if you're trying to go through the SEC, it's pretty tough sledding. So I think he looks at that. He knows the landscape. He knows the schools. He knows the coaches. He knows the recruits. I think it makes a whole lot of sense there. Jimbo Fisher leaving Florida State. I know he's reunited with the athletic director at A&M if that happens. But, man, leaving Florida State?
I understand the surprise, but Jimbo nearly left 2 years ago to go to LSU. He was part of that coup d'etat that almost overthrew Les Miles at the end of the 15 season, and he backed out at the very last minute. And I say this because Jimbo is quirky, and I think the marriage at Florida State has seen better days. And even though there has been a lot of success, not this year, I might add, I think that he's been looking to get out of there. It's difficult to get out of there, though, because that is such a really good job. Texas A&M it's a money pit, quite frankly. There is just so much money to be made there, and I think it is also a school that I've always felt could be the next Alabama. It just never has been. And I think Jimbo knows that as well. And sometimes you just need a change. We all know that. I don't need to tell you.
How does Alabama get back into the national title picture?
They need first thing they need is Ohio State to win, and they just have to hope it's not overly impressive, because it would then come down to Alabama and Ohio State. And now if TCU upsets Oklahoma, it becomes an easier path. But if it's a flat Ohio State Alabama competition, then Alabama's overall resume doesn't quite add up. But they have one loss to Auburn, where Ohio State looked terrible at home against Oklahoma, and it looked even worse on the road, losing by 31 to Iowa. And I think that's what they have to hope for. They don't get the 13th data point, Dan, by winning the conference championship. And Ohio State fans need to be careful what they argue for, because last year they were arguing the exact opposite against Penn State when Penn State won the Big Ten, and Ohio State snuck in without having played for the championship.
So how's this play out in the SEC, Auburn and Georgia rematch?
I might give a slight edge to Georgia today. I mean, that may sound silly, but Auburn at home is different than Auburn anywhere else. And I do think that Georgia is a really spectacular team. They just did not execute 3 weeks ago in Auburn, but they and I also wonder, can Auburn really play any better than they did Saturday against Alabama? I don't see how.
Well, they did against Georgia. I mean, that was pretty impressive what they did to Georgia.
Well, yeah, I mean, but they have put 2 of the all-world performances in a nearly 3-week period. Now, if they do it again, then maybe you need to get them on Sunday Night Football.
Your job is too easy, Paul. You have so many storylines. Really, it is. It is, right? It just writes itself.
Dan, yesterday I was on a plane trying to keep up with all this, and I've never seen anything in a 2-hour flight from Hartford to North Carolina be any more bizarre. And I've covered this league, as you know, for about 135 years. And yesterday, it surprised even a curmudgeon like me how fast things could change. Always great to talk to you, Paul. Thank you. Dan, a pleasure. That's Paul Finebaum.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.